In the dead of night, Max's cries echo through a neglected backyard, where once he was cherished but now is left to wither in the shadows. Forgotten by the family who once adored him, he's become a mere ghost of the dog he used to be. His fur matted, his body weak, and his heart full of fear. But in the darkness, something far more terrifying lurks. As Max fights to survive the cold isolation and haunting whispers in the night, he's left wondering, is the true horror the neglect, or something far worse waiting just beyond the broken fence? Once upon a time in a small suburban neighborhood, there was a dog named Max. He was a retriever with a soft, shiny coat that once sparkled in the sun and eyes full of curiosity. As a puppy, Max was adored by his family. He ran through the house with unbridled joy, his tail wagging furiously as he chased the children around the living room. He would curl up by the fireplace at night, his warmth providing comfort to the family. But as the years passed, things began to change, and Max's once vibrant world began to crumble. The family started to grow distant. The children became absorbed in their phones, their friends, and their schoolwork, while the parents became consumed by their jobs. Max, once part of every moment, now found himself relegated to the backyard. At first, it wasn't so bad. He still had his space to run and bark at the squirrels. But slowly, the backyard transformed into something more like a prison. The fence started to fall apart, its boards cracking and splintering, leaving gaps where Max could see the outside world, but couldn't reach it. The grass grew long and wild, and the once beautiful garden turned into a tangled mess. There were days when the family forgot to feed him, days when no one came outside to play. Slowly, Max began to wither, his once gleaming fur now matted and dull. He no longer raced to the door when he heard footsteps. Instead, he lay by the broken fence, staring at the house, hoping for the tiniest scrap of attention. But the windows remained dark, and the door stayed closed. The silence weighed on him like a heavy fog. As the days turned into weeks, Max's hunger grew. His stomach ached, and his ribs began to show beneath his thin fur. The once loving home had become a distant memory. There were no more warm cuddles by the fire or playful games with the children. Instead, the cold of the backyard seeped into his bones, and the nights grew lonelier and longer. Max would howl softly at the moon, his voice a hollow cry for the family he once knew. Sometimes in the dead of night, strange sounds would echo in the yard, scratching at the windows or rustling in the shadows. Max's fur would bristle as his instincts told him that something was lurking just beyond his sight. His once bright, trusting eyes were now clouded with fear. He could no longer ignore the feeling of being watched, and his heart would race whenever he heard the faintest noise. There were nights when the wind howled through the broken fence like a wailing spirit, and Max would shiver uncontrollably, looking for shelter that no longer existed. One night, as Max lay shivering in the cold, a low growl pierced the air, coming from somewhere deep within the yard. Max's ears perked up, and he lifted his head, his heart pounding in his chest. The growl wasn't from an animal, it was something darker, a cold, guttural sound that sent chills through his bones. Max's eyes darted to the shadows, but there was nothing there, only the flickering light of the moon, casting eerie shapes across the overgrown grass. He whimpered softly, trying to retreat to the corner of the yard, but it was no use. The sense of dread was suffocating. The family, oblivious to his torment, never noticed the changes in him. They didn't see the way his eyes had dulled or the fear that now gripped his heart. They never noticed the haunted look that lingered in his gaze. In fact, it was the neighbor, Sarah, who first noticed something was terribly wrong. She had seen Max in the yard before, but today was different. She saw the way he stood by the broken fence, trembling, his body emaciated and his eyes wide with terror. She saw how he flinched at every small sound, how he cowered in the corner as though he feared something unseen. The poor dog was not just neglected, he was broken, both physically and emotionally. Sarah's heart ached for Max. She knew he didn't deserve this life of torment. She approached the fence cautiously, calling out softly to him. Max's eyes flickered with hope, but fear still gripped him, and he hesitated before taking a tentative step toward her. She reached through the fence and gently stroked his fur, feeling the roughness of neglect. Max flinched at first, but then, as her touch brought a shred of comfort, he relaxed. It was the first kindness he had felt in so long, and it brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Max followed her voice, and she managed to coax him closer. Her heart broke at the sight of him. His once glorious fur now matted and tangled, his bones jutting out from under his thin coat. His body was a mere shell of the dog he once was. Sarah knelt down, speaking softly to him, and Max, so starved for affection, pressed his head into her hand, his tail giving a weak, uncertain wag. She knew she couldn't leave him there any longer. She promised herself that she would make sure he would never suffer alone again. The next day, Sarah spoke to the family. She explained how Max was living in squalor, how he was slowly wasting away, and how they had neglected him for so long. The parents seemed indifferent at first, brushing it off as though it was no big deal. But Sarah's voice grew firm, and she made it clear that Max needed help. He couldn't stay there, not with the fear and loneliness eating away at him. Finally, the family relented, agreeing to let Sarah take Max. It was a reluctant decision, made more out of guilt than care, but it was enough. Max's new life began that day. He was bathed, fed, and cared for in a way he had never experienced. His fur began to grow back, soft and shiny once more. But the damage had been done. Though his body healed, the scars on his soul remained. At night, he still shivered when the wind howled. He still flinched at sudden movements. He still woke from nightmares, his heart racing, his breath shallow. He was loved now, but the horrors of his past lingered in his haunted eyes. Max's story was one of survival. He had escaped the darkness of neglect and found a new life with Sarah. But the horrors of his forgotten years would never truly leave him. Despite the love he found, a small part of him remained broken, forever scarred by the years of loneliness and fear. But in Sarah's care, he began to heal, slowly, painfully, but with hope. For Max, the love he now felt was his redemption, even if it couldn't erase the past. And that, in the end, was enough to give him peace.